This is Kevin Burton, the creator of Polar. I wanted to discuss some thoughts I had with regards to making Polar easier to contribute for new developers. And also sort of not just new developers, but also opening it up, to more people just in general. So one of the easiest ways to look at Polar is that if you wanted to add some functionality, maybe you could build something headless or just change a few pieces of code. So looking at the code now, I wanted to show you the export system. It's a JSON exporter. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, this is just our JSON exporter, and it's pretty simple. It's like 80, 65 lines of code. It's not too big, and anybody can just contribute to this and add small changes to it or fix bugs. And my general thinking here is that if I can get the system set up so that way it's easier to add pieces of framework like this versus going in and changing the user interface. The user interface is going to be the hardest part of actually configuring it. And so let me give you an example. So when you load Polar for the first time, when you reload this little progress bar at the top it's doing a basically a file system check of your data store to make sure it's sane, and it's also doing replication and sync to the cloud storage backend. That is complicated from a user interface perspective because you have to build a progress bar. And then with the Anki sync, I don't think I have Anki running. I'm not going to run it, but basically what it does is when you do Anki sync, it does a whole task background system in the background, and it updates the user interface. And so my thinking is to generally make the primitives a little bit easier to use, so you almost don't even need to think about them. And what I mean by that is that we have this API called a toaster, and the toasters are really easy to create. You can literally just call info, and when you do that, you get a little box up here to the right that just pops up and then it goes away. So the reason I like about that is you don't have to deal with React. It's just a method call, and it just pops that message up. So one of our users suggests, he was wanted to create a bug for implementing RSS. And, you subscribe to an RSS channel, and it basically automatically adds the documents to the RSS channel. That's on one hand, that's easy because if you're a reasonably skilled developer and aren't doing any user interface stuff, processing and parsing RSS feeds and writing them somewhere and making method calls is pretty straightforward. It's primarily the user interface that's more complicated. So what I'm thinking about doing is rewriting it a little bit, making it sort of an API, not necessarily a plugin API, just an API, so that developers can do things like schedule background tasks, update their progress, and obviously persist to the data store. That API is already written. But just saying that, hey, I have a task that's going to run. It's going to do this I/O. This is the progress. That would make a big change. And then maybe for RSS feeds, we're probably going to have some sort of manager utility of like managing sources. Here's a new source, that kind of thing. That would require some user interface, but the vast majority of the code could be sort of headless, and it should make contribution easier. So there's another feature that I've been thinking about that is related to this, is that when we add sources, right now we support files from disk and capturing web pages, and of course you can drag in PDFs and so forth. But one of the things I'd like to add is a search functionality. So you can go up here and you can search, and then we will literally give you a report of what we found. So there's a lot of third-party APIs. What's it called? Well, the Internet Archive has one for searching EPUBs, and there's an Unpaywall and a bunch of other ones. And the idea is that you search for like the name of a paper, and it will pull it down, but it has all the metadata. So all this metadata, like title, updated, we can add that, but we'll also have a lot more, like synopsis and abstract and the DOI and the names of the authors. And adding papers that way, for one, you can find a lot more papers, but two, you can easily add them, and you can easily pull down the PDF. You can easily add the metadata because the metadata gets pulled down. So what I was thinking was is that, well, why don't we just make it easy for developers to add these? So I added this search engine interface, and it's still being developed. But generally, the idea here is that with this package, you can just okay, yeah, I think this is the only one I wrote, so it's just search engine. So I wrote this, and it's just a basic abstract search engine framework, right? So it supports things like so you can use it to define a search engine. So you can say, hey, I want to add archive, ARXIV, and the basic framework is you can get the list of available engines, and then you can execute a query with a string, and then you can get the current and next pages and paginate through the results, and then for every page you can get the items on the page, and then there's a generic list of metadata fields that they have to generally have. So I think most of these are optional, but I think publish is required. So generally, most of them will have, I think we might have to require a title and a few other fields. But if you have the PMID and you have the DOI and you have the authors and all that, there's authored metadata here. Go ahead and add those. But you can just go ahead and you don't have to know anything about Polar's search infrastructure. You can just write this class, which is the implementation of searching archive or ARXIV, however you want to pronounce it. So if you wanted to do one for Google or Google Scholar or the Internet Archive or any other search framework, you just write this one class. And then Polar handles all the user interface stuff. So you don't have to think about that. And and since that's generally the most complicated framework, we can get a lot of developers that are, more, they don't do front end. There's a lot of developers that just don't do front end. There's a lot of front end developers too, but that don't do back end. But um, I think a lot of hackers, you know, they don't necessarily, front end is really complicated, and maybe you do other types of front end. Maybe you don't do React, or you don't do web, and then this would allow, I think, much more contribution. Make it a lot more open for new developers. They can just write a search engine, or they can implement some sort of way to add sources dynamically, some sort of sync API. So the sync API is a good example because the Anki sync framework could be extracted into another API, and so you could implement like Evernote sync or OneNote sync or whatever sync platform you want to support to a third party annotation for system. You can do that because we just give you the plugin interface and you just write the plugin. So what I was thinking is that we would like to support a plugin API, but it's difficult. So this would allow us to, in the meantime, since we don't have a plugin API, we can at least allow users to easily contribute, like 2 or 3 pages of code and say, hey, this is, Internet Archive search, or this is RSS support. And they don't have to implement any of the complex user interface semantics or worry about React or anything like that because we do it for them. And this way we can get easy contributions. The reason we don't support a plugin API yet is because of the way TypeScript compiles and Webpack. The symbols get mangled, and there's no way to inject with that you can with other platforms. With Anki is kind of nice because with Python you can sort of monkey patch everything, and you can replace function symbols and inject yourself at various points. And the compiler it always generates roughly the same structure, whereas with TypeScript, everything is all mangled and so forth. So until we find a solution for that, I have some solutions I'm working for. Until we find a solution for that, this way we can easily say, hey, would you like to contribute a new search engine? And then this is how to do it. And then you just set a pull request, and then we would just discover the search engine, and you can search that site and automatically pull down the metadata. So I think this is a good good middle path. So I'm going to be trying to push this out in the next couple weeks and sort of write more um, examples of how to implement things. I have to improve the user interface. One of the things I want to do is I want to replace the sync API, so it's not at the top. I think I was going to replace it at the bottom, and then there's going to be at the bottom here. Let me just resize this. At the bottom here, there would be like a little pop-up, little box here, and it would have the last message and a general overview of the number of tasks. And then there's a progress bar at the bottom too. And then when you click on it, it'll expand, and become a vertical box, which you can then collapse, obviously. But will show the list of running tasks and then their percentage done. So you can abort the tasks, or and you can just generally get an overview and collapse it. But this way, if you're fetching RSS feeds or doing a sync, you know what the heck. Excuse me, sorry. You know what the heck is happening in the background. And then once I get that done, then, adding sync APIs would be easier. And then, of course, I have to get the search background infrastructure done. But then adding new search platforms would be, just writing one line of, or one or two source files, implementing the support for going to that backend. The other issue is connecting to third-party APIs that don't support CORS in the web interface. So CORS is this HTTP extension basically that allows you to fetch URLs in other sites. And the other issue is progress, is getting the actual, if you're fetching a 2 megabyte file, it would be nice to know what percentage of the download is complete. You can't do that without CORS. Often you can fetch the URL, but you can't get the progress. So what I'm planning on doing is extending the our Chrome extension, our browser extension, and support Safari and Firefox too at some point. But so that way we can actually perform those requests and then also know the progress of them. So I think that's generally my thinking on the subject. So that would be really amazing, because then in the web interface and the local interface, you could easily add, do search engines, do RSS, and then we could take third-party developer contributions without having to monkey with the user interface, especially now that our user interface is stabilizing. So thank you very much. Oh, and if you'd like these features, please consider buying Polar Premium. We're a small independent software company, so if you like Polar and want us to have the financial resources to keep building cool things, please buy Polar Premium. Thank you very much.